Hi, I'm Paul Wilson. I've been an Adobe Captivate eLearning developer since 2005. Over the years, I've created eLearning courses for stakeholders in many organizations. Adobe Captivate is an excellent tool for building a variety of learning interactions. Today, I'm going to share the types of improvements to these interactions that stakeholders want and how you can create them in Adobe Captivate. First, I've created 4 fundamental learning interactions that you and I might submit for review as part of a more extensive course. Let's look at these and talk about what could be improved. Once we go through it together, I'll show you how to make those changes. Let's get started. Okay, so let's preview this project and see how each of these interactions looks.
Sometimes people are unaware that their comments or actions have been hurtful. It's important to address discrimination or harassment when it occurs. Bringing your concerns to the attention of people who have offended you is usually enough to stop the offending behavior. It's not uncommon to have some apprehension about speaking with someone who has hurt you. Here is a simple 4-step process to help make it easier. Click on the left and right arrows to review these steps. Once you've reviewed all the steps, you can continue with the course.
Content carousels are great. This version is easy to build by using simple actions to show our content object's next or previous state. The problem is it isn't always clear where the carousel begins or ends. We can fix this with a couple of advanced actions and a tracking variable. We can also hide the continue button until the learner has visited all the steps. There is some debate around enforcing learners to view all the material before allowing them to move forward. Still, I can tell you that from experience, this is something frequently asked for by many stakeholders. You can explain the pros and cons to your stakeholder, but in the end, the customer is always right.
Here is an example of the 4 steps to resolving workplace discrimination or harassment. In this example, Alex has been telling jokes that would offend people of a certain race. Susan finds the material offensive and inappropriate. She has decided to address her concern with Alex. Click on each step to see how she phrases each step to resolving this case of harassment. Once you've explored this page, click Continue to check your knowledge of the lesson so far.
Click to reveals are an excellent way to chunk information out to your learners. I think it would be great if we could return each step to normal when clicking on another step. Also, I think we can improve the interaction by adding some effects to make it seem like we're flipping each card around. Also, we can apply the forced navigation to this slide as well.
Reggie has made an inconsiderate comment about persons in a group you identify with. Place the steps into the correct order to form your own 4 steps to resolving this issue.
Drag and drop in Adobe Captivate is a great interaction to make e-learning more engaging. One complaint I hear from stakeholders is that the feedback is a little dull. Many stakeholders would like the feedback caption to work more like regular quiz questions. I'll show you a neat way to achieve something similar.
Unless it's an emergency, what is the first thing you should do when you've experienced discrimination or harassment? Select the correct answer.
On this slide, we have a multiple choice knowledge check question. The radio button list is typical of question slides in Adobe Captivate, but unfortunately it isn't always to our stakeholders' liking. Let's see if we can make a custom question slide that matches this course's look and feel and gives you greater flexibility. Okay, so I've returned to the first interaction and we're going to make the following changes. First of all, we're going to disable the left arrow when we're on step number 1 and disable the right arrow when we're on step number 4. So it's very clear that there's a beginning and an end to this 4-step process. We're also going to not show the continue button until your learner has viewed all 4 of the steps in this 4-step process. In addition, we're going to add some audio to each one of the steps because I think that will make it look and sound a lot better. What I've also done is I've added the first audio clip to the end of the slide audio, so they'll hear that right away. And I'm going to delay the appearance of our content carousel by, in this case, about 18 seconds until the first bit of the slide audio has been played. First thing we need to do is set a few things up. We want to set these buttons so that they interrupt any slide audio if the learner decides to press them beforehand. I'm going to go ahead and select the left arrow, and we're going to go to the Properties Inspector, and you'll notice under the Options tab right here, there is the option for stopping slide audio. So I'm going to do that for both of these arrow buttons so that when they're clicked, if the learner has clicked the button early, then it's going to stop the slide audio in favor of playing the step audio for whichever step they happen to be on. The other thing we want to do is we want to hide the continue button. So we're going to select the continue button and then select the visible and output eyeball next to the object label. And this will allow us to set it up to be not visible in output. For our advanced actions to work, we're going to need a tracking variable. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the project drop-down menu and select variables. And we're going to add a new variable. In this case, it's going to be underscore S1 underscore carousel. We're going to give it an initial value of 1, and we'll go ahead and hit save. We'll go ahead and close the variables window. Let's apply our slide audio for the updated version that includes the first step in our 4-step process. So to do this, we're just going to click on our film strip icon first to make sure no objects are selected. Click on the media icon and click on audio. Then we're going to select S1 Audio 2. This is the updated recording that I've made that includes the Step 1 audio as well. We're going to open that, and that's going to import it to my slide. It's asking if it would like to extend the length of my slide to accommodate the audio file. I'm going to click OK. Now, I actually don't want people to click right away. So I'm going to delay the appearance of my arrows and, of course, the content by, in this case, 18.4 seconds. And that's the first moment when the narrator describes the 4-step process. So I'm going to select each of these items, and we're going to go down to the timeline and move down to 18.4 seconds, placing my playhead at that exact spot. And what we'll do is use a keyboard shortcut that will allow you to lock these items to not appear until this mark on the playhead. So Control L is what you need to do in this case. And we're also going to make sure that the timing for these objects is fade in for each of them. They already are, but that's perfect in this case here because I don't want them to very abruptly appear. I just want them to naturally appear at this point. So we have some additional things that we need to set up when we arrive on the slide, and we need our first advanced action for that. So we're going to click on the project drop-down menu and select advanced actions. This advanced action is going to be called S1 underscore on underscore enter. And the very first thing we need to do is to delay our next actions by that same 18.4 seconds. So we're going to choose the command delay next actions by literally 18.4 seconds. We're going to change the state of our information content item to the first state, the normal state in this case. So change state of S1 content to normal. We're going to disable our left button because we are on the first of the 4 items. So S1 carousel L. And we're going to change its appearance, its state, to that disabled state that I've created for it, which is simply the same image but grayed out. Next, we're going to enable the right arrow, and we're going to make sure that our tracking variable with a value of 1 in case a learner has returned to this slide from a later slide. I'm going to save this as an action, click OK, and click Close. To initiate this, we need to open our Properties Inspector and set up the on enter to be on enter advanced actions, and we select that very same script that we just wrote. Next, I need to write the advanced action for my right arrow so that it does all the things that we need it to do. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Project and click on Advanced Actions. We're going to call this S1 underscore right. And this is actually going to contain multiple decision tabs. The first tab, we'll simply call it Click. And there's only going to be one thing that happens here, and we're going to increment the value of our tracking variable by a value of 1. So increment is the action. There's our S1 carousel, and we're increasing it by a value of 1 from whatever it was before. Next, we're going to go over to our next decision tab, and this one's going to be a conditional tab. Here is where we're going to check the value of that variable, and depending on its value, perform a number of steps. So we're going to go ahead and select conditional, and we'll say if our S1 carousel tracking variable is equal to the literal value of 1. We're going to first of all stop any audio that's already been playing from one of the other steps. So stop triggered audio. If we are on step number 1, we want to make sure that this left arrow is disabled and has the appearance of disabled. So we're going to disable carousel left, change the appearance of it to our disabled state. We're also going to change our content item in the middle to normal, which is in this case the step 1 information. We're going to play some audio. So in this case here, we're going to select one of the audio files I've prepared, and we're going to make sure that our right arrow is enabled and of course appears like it's enabled and ready to be used. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's a lot of stuff for step number 1. I need to do this 3 more times. Fortunately, this is actually relatively easy to do because I can duplicate what we've done here and just make some small changes to it. So I'm going to call this one step number 2. We're going to change the check for the variable to see if it's now step number 2. In this case, we're going to enable the left arrow, change the state of the left arrow to normal. We're going to change the content to step number 2, and we're going to play the audio for step number 2. And there's nothing we need to change here because the right arrow will still be enabled. So that's step number 2 done. Let's do number 3. We'll duplicate that decision, relabel this tab to be step number 3. We'll change the tracking variable to look for number 3. We'll change our multi-state content to step number 3, and we'll play the audio for step number 3. We'll still have everything else the same, and now we'll do step number 4. So we'll duplicate number 3. We'll check to see if our tracking variable is set to 4. In this case here, we'll still enable the left arrow. We're going to change the content object to step number 4, and we'll import in the audio for step number 4. We will, however, disable our right carousel arrow and change the state to disabled. But there is one last thing that we also need to do. Don't forget that this is the 4th state. We should update this to say 4. But we also need to show that continue button because at this point they will have now seen all of the steps. So we'll go ahead and we will show our slide 1 next button. So we can save this as an action, click OK, And again, like before, you might be thinking, geez, that's a lot of steps. We need to do the same thing for the left arrow. The good news is that this is really easy to duplicate and make one small change so that the left arrow works just the same. So I'm going to click on this duplicate action, and we'll just change the title of this to slide 1, in this case, left. And all we need to change, step 1, 2, 3, 4 remain the same, but our initial click, instead of incrementing our tracking variable by a value of 1, we're going to decrement our tracking variable by a value of 1. So let's update that action, click OK, click Close, and we should be good to go. So let's first of all double check a couple of things. So our onEnter action is running our slide 1 onEnter action. Our left arrow, we're going to need to change that from its previous changing the state action to executing advanced action, and make sure it's pointing at the left advanced action. The same thing for the right. We'll execute advanced actions. S1 right. We'll double check that our audio is on the timeline, and I think we're good to go. Let's preview this now and see if we've got it right.
Sometimes people are unaware that their comments or actions have been hurtful. It's important to address discrimination or harassment when it occurs. Bringing your concerns to the attention of people who have offended you is usually enough to stop the offending behavior. It's not uncommon to have some apprehension about speaking with someone who has hurt you. Here is a simple 4-step process to help make it easier. Click on the left and right arrows to review these steps. Once you've reviewed all the steps, you can continue with the course.
Describe the behavior. Be specific and tell the person exactly what it was that offended you. This is an important first step and will help the person understand the problem. Express your feelings using I statements. Don't just say the behavior was wrong. Tell them how it made you feel. Use I statements to help your coworker understand how their actions or comments impacted you. Specify the new type of behavior. It's an essential step to explain what acceptable behavior would be and how you expect them to behave. Identify the consequences. Finally, describing what steps you will take if you do not see a change in their behavior will help them understand the seriousness of the matter. These steps should be based on the reporting process from your company's harassment policy.
So as you can see, we had the continue button hidden until we visited all 4 states. And unlike before, there's very clearly a beginning and an end to this 4-step process, because of course on step number 1, the left arrow was grayed out and disabled, and on step number 4, the right arrow is grayed out and disabled. So your stakeholder will be much happier with this particular interaction. Okay, here we are on the second of our 4 interactions, and this one is a click to reveal. Now, what we want to do to improve this one is when we click on another one of the buttons on this slide, we want any previously clicked items to return to the regular description state, showing which stage that we're on. We're also going to add audio to each of the buttons, and we're also going to add a really cool effect to make it look like we're flipping these tabs over. We're also going to hide the continue button like on the first interaction until the user has clicked on all 4 items. So let's get started here. The first thing we need to do is select our individual buttons, go over to our Properties Inspector, and make sure that in the Options tab, the audio, the slide audio, is stopped when users click on these buttons. So this way we can ensure that we won't have 2 audio items playing at the same time. Next, we're going to select our Continue button and make sure that it's not visible in output. And in order for the forced navigation to work, we're going to need 4 tracking variables, 1 for each of the buttons on this slide. So I'm going to click on my project drop-down menu and select variables. I'm going to click on add new, and we'll call the first one underscore S2 underscore button 1. Save that one, add new, and same format but for button 2, button 3, and button 4. Now we can go ahead and close the variables window, and we're going to write the first advanced action, in this case for button 1. So we're going to click on the project drop-down menu and select advanced actions, and we'll call this one S2 for slide 2 underscore button 1. Now there's going to be 2 decision tabs here. The first one, we're just going to call it click, and we're going to run a series of actions. The first thing we want to do is make sure that we're not hearing 2 audio items at the same time. So we're going to stop triggered audio. Again, we're keeping track of which button is being pressed. So we're going to assign S2 button 1 with the literal value of 1. Now we're going to apply that effect to look like the button is being flipped over. So we're going to apply effect to slide 2 button 1, and the effect we're going to choose is the exit version of collapse across. I'm going to change some of the parameters for this effect by clicking on the 3-dot icon, and we'll set the duration to be 0.3 seconds, and I'm going to set the ease at 100%. Go ahead and click OK. Now, to ensure that we will be able to actually see the effect, we're going to delay the next actions by the same 0.3 seconds. So delay next actions by the literal value 0.3 seconds. Now we want to change the state of our buttons that we see on screen. And we're not only going to change the state of the button that we're pressing, but we're going to make sure that all the remaining buttons go back to their normal state. So we're going to change the state of button 1 to clicked. I set up these multi-state objects ahead of time, and the click state includes the example of what someone would say in this 4-step process. But we're also going to change the state of button 2 back to normal in case it was already clicked. Button 3 back to normal. And button 4 back to normal. Now we're also going to apply effect to the new state. So what you'll see, of course, is an entrance effect for stretch across. And again, we're going to do the same settings as before, 0.3 and 100% ease. Click OK. And finally, we're going to play the audio file associated for this step in the 4-step process. So double click on the next item and choose play audio. And we're going to need to import that. So let's go to where I've got those files, slide to button 1.wave. And now we're set up for the click. The other thing we need, of course, is another tab where we check to see if we are finished this interaction. So we need a conditional tab, and we're going to check our tracking variables. So we're going to say if slide to button 1 is equal to the literal value of 1, and we can save a little time here by copying and pasting 3 more versions of that same check, but we'll just change it to button 2, button 3, and button 4. And of course, if all 4 of these are correct, we're going to go ahead and we're going to show our slide to next button. So we can go ahead and save this as an action. So that's completed. And now we just need to make 3 more versions for the other 3 buttons. And again, we can take advantage of the duplicate action feature. So we'll click on that and we'll create slide 2, button 2. And all that we need to do is change a few items that are on this first tab. The check tab remains exactly as it was. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to assign S to button 2 with a value of 1. We're going to apply the same effect, but this time to button 2. Same delay. We're going to change the state of button 1 back to normal and change button 2 to clicked. And we're going to make sure that the additional effect of stretch across will be for button 2. And of course, we'll need to update the audio that's being played. So we'll import the new audio for that particular item here. Update that action, click OK, and let's duplicate it once more. And again, just some small changes here. So we'll assign our third tracking variable with a value of 1. We'll apply the effect to button 3. We'll turn button 2 back to normal and this time apply it to button 3. And we'll apply the effect also to button 3. And again, we'll update the WAV file that we're going to play here, in this case, the third step. Update that action, click OK, and one more duplicate to do, and this will be for button 4. We'll assign our fourth tracking variable with a value of 1. We'll apply the effect to button 4, and again we'll make sure that the appropriate button is getting the clicked state, and we'll apply the effect to button 4 and make sure that we're playing the fourth step audio. Let's update this action, click OK, and click Close. So now what we can do is make sure that we are assigning the appropriate advanced action to each one of these buttons. So we will change these from their current change state of action to execute advanced action. And make sure we're pointing to the slide 2 button 1 action. Same thing here. Button 2. Button 3. And of course, button 4. So I think we're good to test this out. Let's preview in HTML5.
Here is an example of the 4 steps to resolving workplace discrimination or harassment. In this example, Alex has been telling jokes that would offend people of a certain race. Susan finds the material offensive and inappropriate. She has decided to address her concern with Alex. Click on each step to see how she phrases each step to resolving this case of harassment. Once you have explored this page, click Continue to check your knowledge of the lesson so far.
Alex, earlier you told a joke about my ethnic group here in the office. I am offended by jokes like this because it's demeaning to me. I would appreciate it if you would stop telling jokes that make fun of people's race. If this continues, I will have to speak to our manager or HR about it.
So again, much improved over the original interaction. We can always see what the original step is because, of course, the buttons are returning to their normal behavior. The flip around effect is really cool. And of course, having the audio narration for each step as well really improves this interaction. And of course, now that I've clicked all 4 items, I can continue with the rest of my course. Okay, this brings us now to our third interaction that we're going to work on here today. And this one is a drag and drop knowledge check. Adobe Captivate has an excellent drag and drop tool built in. and it allows you to add a lot of interactivity to your learning. The only criticism I have of it is the captioning and subsequent actions associated with the interaction are a little unremarkable. So in this case here, what typically happens is you'll receive a correct caption or an incorrect caption. It will display for a certain number of seconds as the slide continues to play. And then of course the slide transitions to the next slide and so on. So what I like to do is turn off my success and failure captions, instead build my own caption with its own action depending on whether it's a success or failure situation here. So the first thing I want to do is I need to create an overlay, something to mask the background out. So I'm going to use just a rectangle shape here. I'm going to start in the upper left-hand corner and draw it down to the right there. It's showing up as transparent right now, but if I go to the Properties Inspector, I can select a object style that I've already created for this. And in this case here, I simply called it Overlay. So that's going to be sort of a gray background that's about 70% opacity. Next, I'm going to add a rounded rectangle approximately in the middle of my slide here. Something about that size there. Again, I also have an object style for this, and it happens to be pop-out background. I'm going to change the rounded corners a little bit so they're a little bit more subtle. One of the things I like to use is my alignment toolbar when I'm setting up objects on the slide like this, because this way it makes it really easy to center an object like this on the slide. Next, I need a message here. So in this case here, we're going to say the default message, which will be correct. Now there's an opportunity here, rather than creating another similar object, we can turn this into a multi-state object where the alternate message will reside. So I'm going to click on the plus icon next to my object state here, and we'll call this one review. Because essentially what we're going to do is create a different action that basically puts the learner into a remediation situation. So they'll be able to go back, learn what they need to have learned in the first place, and then make another attempt when they return to this slide. So we'll just call that review, and we'll just put in an alternate message for review. We also need some buttons for each of those situations. So we're going to need a continue button, and we're going to need a review button. So I'm also going to use a rounded rectangle for that. We'll draw our continue button here. Make sure that we choose the object style that I've already set up for continue buttons. And I'll just add the appropriate text here. I'm going to duplicate this button and change the title to be review here. We'll select both of these and use as button, and then of course set up the actions for those. So for continue, it'll be the default action of going to the next slide. I like to turn on the hand cursor and disable the click sound. In the case of review, because it is for remediation, we're going to actually take them to the previous slide. And I'll also turn on the hand cursor and disable the click sound here. I'm going to select both my buttons here and make sure that they're centered on the slide, so they'll cover each other up right now, but you'll only see one or the other depending on the message that you see. I'm just going to adjust that there. A couple things you need to do to these objects. Let's open up the timeline. You'll notice that the default objects, of course, are only 3 seconds in length. So we're going to select all of these objects, and then I'm going to press Ctrl E, which will extend the appearance of these objects right to the end of the slide. Another thing that's important, especially when you're writing an advanced action associated with this, is you're going to need to label all of your objects here. So starting with our overlay, I'm going to call this S3 overlay. The caption itself will be called S3 caption. My continue button, which goes to the next slide, We'll call that S3 continue. And for my review button, we'll call that S3 review. So now I have pretty much all the objects I need to make this work. I just need to write the 3 advanced actions that I'm going to need for this interaction to do what I needed to do. The first advanced action we need is an onEnter action, which will reset all these objects to be not visible in output. So let's click on the project drop-down menu and select advanced actions. We'll call this S3 underscore on underscore enter. And we're going to simply hide our overlay, hide our caption, and hide our continue button, and hide our review button. So let's save that as an action, click OK, and now we'll create a new advanced action which we'll call S3 underscore success. In this case, we're going to show our overlay, show our caption, change the state of our caption to normal, which is the on success view, and we're going to also show our continue button. So we can save that as an action, click OK, and now we're going to do our review. We'll call it S3 underscore remediation. Like before, we're going to show our overlay, show our caption. We're going to change the state of our caption to review, and we're going to show our review button. So we can save that as an action, click OK, and click close. Now what we need to do is to set up our drag and drop to use these advanced actions as well as the onEnter action of our slide. So since we're already here at the drag and drop panel, I'm going to uncheck infinite attempts so that we have a failure possibility, and we'll give them 2 tries at this interaction. If they're successful, we're going to execute advanced actions, and we're going to choose the S3 success advanced action. If they're not successful, we're going to also execute advanced actions, but we're going to choose the S3 remediation advanced action. So that's pretty much good to go. The other thing I like to check is to make sure that learners can redrag accidentally dropped sources that have been dropped on the wrong drop target to other locations. It makes using a drag and drop a lot easier. And let's go to our properties inspector for the slide. We need to set up our onEnter advanced action that resets the slide each time the learner arrives here. So we're going to execute advanced actions like before, and we're going to choose the S3 onEnter advanced action. Let's preview this and see how it works.
Reggie has made an inconsiderate comment about persons in a group you identify with. Place the steps into the correct order to form your own 4 steps to resolving this issue.
Okay, so I'm going to purposely get this wrong this time around. And we'll purposely get it wrong a second time. So now we see our review message incorrect. Click the review button to review this material again. So if I click review, it will take me back to the previous slide in this lesson. And of course, once I've had an opportunity to review this material again, I can press continue. And now, of course, I'll have another opportunity to try this again. And now, of course, I get the correct message. And of course, if I press continue, it goes to the next slide. So that brings us to our 4th and final learning interaction. In this case, it's simply a knowledge check slide. And there's nothing wrong with Adobe Captivate's knowledge check slides. They work quite well as practice questions, allowing your learners to practice their newfound knowledge or skill. But every now and then a stakeholder might point out to me that they don't like the radio buttons and the list of answers there. They may not like the way the layout is or something to that effect, or perhaps the color of the radio buttons. And of course, all this stuff is kind of baked into Captivate, and there's very little that you can do to change it. So what I often will do is instead of using a knowledge check slide, I'll build my own knowledge check slide like I've got here. Let me just show you a few things that I've set up initially. So I have 4 buttons on my slide here. These are the answers, the distractors, and the correct answers. If we go into our properties inspector, you can see that these are already multi-state objects. So let's take a look at the first one here. I have the initial state, which is the normal state, and then I've created my own custom state called selected. And this is what the button will change to when a learner clicks on it. This way the learner will know exactly which item that they've selected. Also, what I have here is another multi-state object that contains all of my captions. So if we take a look at this, you can see that we have our incomplete caption. We have captions for all of our distractors, as well as our correct caption. And you can edit these however you wish. I've simply labeled them incomplete, incorrect 1, 2, and 4 in this case. And the third option, of course, is the correct answer. I also have a reset button, which will reset the interaction. Anytime the learner decides that they want to reset the slide, they can do so. The advanced action that I'll write for this will also be the on-enter action. So essentially, this knowledge check will reset itself every single time the learner visits the slide. There's also going to be a submit button, and that's going to contain the advanced action that checks to see if you've selected the correct answer. There is a continue button that will only appear once the learner has completed this knowledge check. So by default, as you can see here, it's not visible in output. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to write the advanced action that takes care of keeping track of which button was selected, as well as to change the appearance of the clicked item. Let's go into our project drop-down menu and select variables. We're going to need a variable for each one of the answers on this particular slide. So I'm going to add new, and I'm going to call this underscore S4 underscore button 1. Save that. Add new, button 2, button 3, and then of course button 4. So I have a variable that keeps track of whichever button is pressed. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And now we're going to write the advanced action for clicking on button 1. So we'll go into the project drop-down menu, select advanced actions, and we'll call this S4 underscore button 1. So I've already labeled my answers there. So we're first of all going to change the state of these buttons. The first one is, of course, button 1, and we're going to change it to selected. We're also going to change the state of button 2 back to normal in case it was selected already. And we can actually copy this and paste it a number of times for the other 2 remaining buttons. So this one will be button 3. And I've added the correct there as a reminder to myself which one is correct. And we'll do button 4 here. That takes care of the appearance of our buttons, but we also need to assign a value to those variables. So we're going to assign underscore slide 4 button 1 with the literal value of 1. And again, I can cheat a little bit here by copying and pasting this a number of times. so that I have one for each one. This will be button 2. And in the case of the other buttons, we want to make those a value of 0. Now, if we've answered the question before, there might be some feedback on the screen that's already displaying from an earlier attempt. So let's take this opportunity to change the state of our feedback item, slide 4 feedback, back to normal. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as an action and click OK. And I can actually save myself a lot of time by duplicating this advanced action 3 more times and making some small changes so that it accounts for all the possible buttons on this slide. So let's start by duplicating it, and we'll change the title to S4 button 2, and we'll change this button 1 to normal and change button 2 to selected. And we'll change button 1's variable back to 0 and change button 2 to selected or to a value of 1. And we'll update that action, click OK. We'll duplicate it again. Make sure that in this example, the correct answer, which is answer 3, is selected. And we'll keep track of that by updating the variable for answer 3. Update that action, click OK, and let's duplicate it once more. So we'll relabel this one to be button 4, and we'll change them all back to normal and select button 4, put the variables all back to 0, and assign a value of 1 to the 4th variable. That takes care of our advanced actions for the buttons there. If I update that action, click OK, and click Close. Let's first of all select all of our buttons, go to the Actions tab, and execute advanced actions. And we'll make sure that we're selecting S4 button 1. And in the case of the second button, we'll just change that to button 2, button 3, and button 4. So that takes care of the selection and keeping track of what selection was made. Next, what we want to do is work on the advanced action for our Submit button. So let's click on the Project drop-down menu and select Advanced Actions. And we're going to call this one S4_submit. Now this is going to contain multiple tabs, basically for each situation. The first tab we'll take care of is our correct answer. So we'll just call this correct. And this is going to be a conditional advanced action. In other words, we're going to be looking at a condition, and depending on whether that condition is true or not, we're going to run a bunch of actions. So what we're going to look at is the variable. In this case here, the variable for _slide4_ button 3, because we know that's the correct answer. If it is equal to the literal value of 1, we're going to perform the following actions. We're going to first of all disable all of our buttons, because once they've got it correct, there's no reason for them to click on anything else. So we're going to go ahead and disable slide 4 button 1. I can copy this and paste it a number of times just so I can make a small change to each of these. Button 2, button 3, and button 4. Now I have some buttons on the slide that I don't need to display any longer if the learner has got those correct. So we're going to hide the Reset button. We'll hide the Submit button itself. And we'll go ahead and we'll show our Continue button. And last but not least, we're going to update the feedback caption to indicate that the learner has got this correct. So let's go ahead and change the state of our slide 4 feedback, and let's just choose the correct state for that. Next, let's do the Advanced Action tab for button 1. So we'll call this button 1. Also needs to be a conditional tab, and we're just going to say if the variable button 1 is equal to the literal value of 1, we're going to change the state of our feedback item to incorrect 0, 1. And similarly, we can duplicate this tab a number of times for button 2. We'll just change the variable to be our slide 4 button 2 variable, and we'll change our feedback caption to incorrect number 2. Let's duplicate this tab once more, and in this case here, this will be for button 4, because remember, button 3 is the correct answer, and we've taken care of that already. If slide 4 button 4 is equal to 1, and we'll change the feedback caption to incorrect number 4. The last one we want to do is we want to look at if nothing has been selected. So we'll call this incomplete. It's also a conditional tab, and we're going to say if our slide 4 button 1 variable is equal to the literal value of 0, and I'm going to copy this and paste it a total of 4 times, and just change that to be slide 4 button 2, slide 4 button 3, and slide 4 button 4. So in other words, if we haven't pressed anything at all, we're going to change the state of our feedback item to incomplete. So we can save this as an action, click OK, and click Close. So we've taken care of the advanced action for our Submit button. There's one last advanced action that we need, and that's going to be to reset the slide. And we're going to need to do that for a number of situations. When a learner returns to this slide, perhaps they come back to double check their answer, or perhaps they're coming in for the first time. We want to reset everything back to normal. So we need to write an advanced action for that, and we'll call this slide 4 underscore reset. Now, the first thing we want to do is make sure there's no buttons selected. There shouldn't be anyway, but just to be sure, we're going to change the state of slide 4, button 1, to normal. I'm going to copy this and paste it 3 more times here. And make sure we're doing the same thing for button 2. Button 3. Everything's back to normal. Let's make sure we assign our variables all a value of 0. So we'll scroll down until we get to S4 button 1, literally a value of 0. And again, we can copy, paste that 3 more times, and make sure we're pointing at the right variables. Let's hide the next button to make sure that that's not visible. Let's show the submit button. Let's show our reset button. And last but not least, let's make sure we've enabled all of our buttons here. Enable, slide 4, button 1. Again, we can copy that. We can paste it in, and paste it in there. So let's make sure that we're enabling all of those buttons there. There we go. So that's our slide 4 reset function. Let's save this as an action, click OK, and click close. Now what we want to do is make sure that these advanced actions are assigned to everything we need them to be assigned to. So our onEnter action will also be that same function as the reset button. So let's execute advanced actions. We'll make sure that we select our S4 reset advanced action. And we'll select our reset button. Again, the same advanced action, execute advanced actions, and we'll choose S4 reset. We'll select our submit button and make sure that we're running the advanced action for S4 submit. So let's do a preview. So let's preview HTML5 in browser. Okay, so as you can see here, we have our knowledge check question. Let's purposely get it wrong this time. We'll speak to our manager, which in this case is not the correct answer, and we'll hit submit. We see, of course, our feedback caption that's specific to this answer. Speaking to your manager is a good idea, but there might be something else you want to do first. Try again. So let's make another choice. In this case, we'll choose the correct answer, which is document the incident. If we choose that, you'll notice that the feedback goes away. And of course, when I select this answer, it unselects the previous answer, and I'm ready to submit once again. If I wish, I can reset the entire interaction and everything returns back to normal. Let's choose document the incident, and we'll hit submit this time. So we get our correct caption, which is exactly what we would expect. And of course, the submit and reset button go away, and I'm left with a continue button, which will simply take me to the next slide. I could actually make that continue button contribute to the final quiz and make this a scoreable interaction instead of just a knowledge check. Okay, so I've exited the preview, and I want to address one final thing about the interactions we've created today. While you might be thinking that these interactions were complicated or time-consuming to make, I want to assure you that there is one benefit of these interactions you might not be aware of that I want to share with you now. If you watch my video tutorials on my YouTube channel, you might hear me mention building your e-learning tool belt. These interactions are an example of this. Suppose you select the slide for any of these interactions and copy it. Then create or open another Captivate project. You can paste these slides in and reuse all that hard work. Let's do that right now so you can see an example of that. So if I select this last multiple choice knowledge check and I right click on this and select copy, now I go to my file drop down menu, create a new project. In this case it'll be a blank project, and we'll choose the same size that we have here, 1470 by 900, and click OK. I can actually now paste in that slide that we've created, and not only will the slide come over with all of the appearances that we had originally, but will also come over with all the variables and advanced actions. Now, here's the kicker. You can paste not just once, but dozens of times over. So if I need, let's say, 10 or 20 multiple choice knowledge checks, I can just simply repeat the pasting process and I get as many of these knowledge checks as I need. All that I need to do is replace the text and perhaps rearrange the answers so that the correct answer isn't always answer 3 in this case here. But it's just a matter of doing that. When you take a look at your project drop-down menu and go into variables, you'll see all sorts of new copies of the variables needed to make this work. And similarly, you'll see all the different advanced actions for all the different versions of these slides. So keep that in mind. While the initial hard work to create these interactions may at first seem like too much work or not worth the effort, consider the fact that once you have a working copy of any one of these interactions, you can copy and paste it from one project to another. Now that's the key. You have to paste it from one project to another. You can't simply duplicate the slide in the same project. So what I like to do is I like to keep a folder where I have a whole bunch of Captivate project files that contain these sorts of interactions so that I can use them over and over again. I'd like to thank everyone for viewing my session today. Don't forget to check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/paulwilsonlearning, and you can visit my website at captivateteacher.com.